Okay, we're ready to start, Chair.
Thank you. Welcome to the meeting of the Skills, Economy and Growth Commission. To all our guests in our virtual meeting room and to everyone watching online. This meeting is being recorded and is also being live streamed now. Please note the press may be in attendance. The rights of the press and public to record and film the meeting will apply. Please can you all keep your microphones on mute throughout, as this will prevent audio feedback. If you're still getting feedback, please turn off nearby devices. If somebody forgets to switch off their microphone, I will mute them. All members and meeting participants should keep their cameras on. Please only unmute your microphones when you're required to make a presentation or to ask or answer a question. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand to get my attention. You will note there is a chat function. This should only be used to alert me that you wish to speak, to raise points of order, or to report tech problems you might be having, and officers will assist you if you are having tech problems. The chat function must not be used to have conversations with other participants or to enter personal or sensitive information. All chat is recorded, as is a formal meeting. We haven't had anybody joined by audio, have we?
No, Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I'm Councillor Claire Potter, which I didn't start off with, and I'm Vice Chair of Skills, Economy and Growth, and I'm chairing the meeting tonight because Councillor Billington, our Chair, has given her apologies. Are there any other apologies?
No, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. Okay. Any urgent items of business? Any raised, Tim?
No.
Thank you. So item number 3, any declarations of interest, members? Okay. Meeting participants? No. Okay. Item 4, work programme for 21-22. Have any members got any comments or questions about the SEG work programme? You will notice we've developed quite a bit the November meeting, and January, February, March are still to be further developed, but our subject content is quite clear. If you have a quick look at the programme, which page is that on the agenda pack, Tim?
It should be one of the first pages after the intro.
Oh, it's on page 7.
Yes.
Any comments at all?
Sorry, just catching up.
I think, Chair, having kind of discussed with other members, I think that there was a move to have a second part of the regeneration conversation at some point in the future.
Yes, we can certainly note that, Tim, and I will follow that up.
Can I just add to that, yes, to particularly look at the economic dimension of regeneration be something I would like to see, so we can address the regeneration as a whole, rather than just parts of it.
Yep. Thank you. Noted. Any other comments, members? Okay. Just checking online with our members online. Any comments on the work programme? Welcome, Sam. I don't think I welcome everybody online. I've just realised, so that's an error on my part. So I'd like to, I'll start before the next agenda item. I'd like to welcome Councillor Sam Pallis, who's just joined us. There's Councillor Gilbert Smith, who's also present. We've also got, I did notice Councillor Peter Snell, but he seems to have disappeared. We have Alex Russell from Hackney Wick, We've got Natalie Broughton, Head of Planning. We've got Suzanne Johnson to talk about item 5, and Katie Glasgow. Welcome all, and apologies for doing that late. Okay, we can now move on to our main substantive item, which is item 5, community involvement in planning and area regeneration. We have 90 minutes for this item, obviously starting from now, which is 19:05. As Hackney emerges from coronavirus and looks to rebuild better, cleaner and greener, area regeneration will be a crucial element of rejuvenating our local spaces, both economically and in terms of their vibrancy, in as fair a way as possible, and in a way that supports the council's wider inclusive economy objectives. It's important that the plans not only reflect the views and wishes of local residents, but that they communicate to the community that they've been directly involved in the quality area of the regeneration that's happening around them. So the plans that our main plans for area regeneration include Hatton Central, Dalston and Hackney Wick. So I would like to welcome to the meeting for the discussion. Actually, I've kind of just done this, but I'll give you your proper titles. From the London Borough of Hackney, we've got speakers in Susan Johnson, Head of Area Regeneration, Natalie Broughton, Head of Planning, and Katie Glasgow, the Deputy Manager, Planning and Regulatory Services. And from Hackney Wick Development Trust, we've got Alex Russell, who is the Executive Chair of the Hackney Wick Development Trust. So I'd like to invite Susan Johnson to actually start on behalf of the speaker. So if you could unmute your microphone, please, Suzanne.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, the presentation structured in such a way that planning and area regen have effectively joined up, and the planning piece will go first, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure. However you want to present.
Yep. I'll hand over to Natalie and Katie.
Thank you. Can I say a few words of introduction, Chair? Is that okay?
Chair.
Oh, sorry. Can you, come on, Natalie, can you ask that question again?
That's fine. I'm just going to say a few words of introduction. Do we have the slides ready to present? Katie, are you going to share the slides?
I can do them.
Just bear with us. Whilst Katie's bringing up the slides, I'll say a few words of introduction and perhaps explain the order in which we're going to speak tonight and why we've combined the slides. So firstly, thank you for the opportunity to come and present to you this evening, and good evening, members. So we're going to talk about community engagement in both planning and regeneration. I'm Natalie Broughton, as Councillor Potter said. I'm the Head of Planning and Building Control, and I'm shortly going to hand over to Katie Glasgow, who's our Strategic Planning Manager, before she then hands over to Suzanne. So we're going to start by just giving a bit of an overview of planning for growth and regeneration in Hackney. So a bit of an overview of the local plan 2033, which sets out our key growth areas and areas for regeneration up to 2033. And then we'll tell you a bit about how we engage the community in that process of preparing the local plan, and a bit more about community engagement in the plan making. We're then going to move on to talking about community engagement in the decision making, so how the community gets involved in decisions on planning applications and through consultation on planning applications. And then that then leads us to hand over to Suzanne, who'll give a bit more information on the relationship between strategic planning in particular and area regeneration, and the more kind of detailed consultation that's carried out as part of the council's functions for regeneration. So I think I'm going to hand over to Katie next and start with the local plan. Thank you.
Just checking I'm off mute.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, thank you, Natalie, and good evening, councillors. So, as Natalie said, we recently adopted our local plan, LP33, last year in July. And what that does, it sets out a kind of positive growth strategy alongside planning policies and guidance, will enable us to direct development investment into the borough up to 2033. So this plan responds to the challenges and the opportunities facing the borough, and many of which of these have been identified through the extensive community engagement that was undertaken to deliver the community strategy, as well as the formal consultation stages of the local plan process, which I'll touch on a little bit later. So Hackney's population is expected to grow significantly. We're looking to reach around 320 by 2033. So obviously with that growth, the needs arises for the delivery of new homes, new jobs, new community facilities, and important infrastructure to support that growth. So the plan ensures that new development serves the needs of the community, whilst making sure that the right development comes forward at the right time and the right place, and ensuring that growth is managed in a careful and considered way. So in order to do that, the plan sets out a vision for how we'd like to see growth come forward in the area, but also developed a series of place policies for key growth areas. So each of these place policies set out a vision for what the area should look like. It provides an overview of the urban character, as well as some development principles, and also identifies development opportunities in each area, including some key sites. In preparing the area action plan, so these area-based plans, it's really important to ensure that the growth come forwards in a considered way. These areas identified, and the ones in bold, is where we have a program of preparing new plans, which I'll just take you through now. So you can see we are embarking on preparing new plans, area regeneration plans, for key number of growth areas. So we have developing area action plans for Stamford Hill and Shoreditch. And what these plans will do is set out detailed policy guidance around land use, design, building heights, public realm, for example. They are detailed kind of planning and regeneration strategies. These area action plans will have the same development status as the local plan. So therefore they are really important tools in how we guide development and in the decision-making process as applications come forward. We're also looking to develop supplementary planning guidance for a number of key areas. So we've highlighted Dalston, Hatton Central, Homerton and Clapton. And again, these can set out very clear planning and regeneration strategies for these areas and how growth should likely to come forward, so we can really shape that. And it's really important. This provides an opportunity to engage extensively with communities in each of these areas and making sure that we involve them from the outset. They play a critical role to the plans, and significant work has been undertaken to date in engaging communities in these areas from the outset, but also through key stages. You can see they're at various stages of development in their plan making process, some of which are nearing kind of more finalised stages in terms of the area action plans, but work is underway. Certainly with Dalston, we've recently completed consultation on a draft plan, and then sort of Hackney Central work is following, and the Homerton and Clapton work is more of at initial stages. So the local plan also identifies a number of site allocations. So these have a key role in shaping development and regeneration in the area. These are places and sites where we can look to deliver on those growth headlines as set out earlier in the slides. They're a real opportunity to deliver much needed homes, affordable homes, jobs, community spaces and public realm. So there's 33 sites identified in the plan, and a number of those fall within the key growth areas that I outlined earlier. So they do fall within the area-based plans that we will be preparing. So that provides an overview of sort of planning and how kind of the framework in the local plan and through the area-based plans we'll be looking to develop that and shape regeneration going forward. I'd just like to talk you through how we engage the community in the plan making process, both plan making and the development management process. So what we do, I mean, it's very much at the heart of what we do. It's critical that we engage communities right from the outset and throughout the entire plan making process. This is a key objective recognised in the National Planning Policy Framework, and in order to ensure that there is the important stages of consultation carried out in developing these plans, that's recognised in legislation, through the Town and Country Planning Regulations. But at a local level, the council has produced a statement of community involvement, and that really is the council's statement to the public about how we will involve the community both in the preparation of planning policy and planning guidance, but also through the development management process. So focusing now on strategic planning. So as you can see, we have doing a lot of work in terms of developing area-based plans going forward. And I think very much at the heart of what we do is recognising the role of communities in shaping that from the outset. So through all the stages of developing these plans, we ensure that in the first instance, we identify and understand what the stakeholders are and the community makeup is for each of these areas. And then we look to invite them to take part in the process and make sure they're aware that this plan making process is underway. So in terms of when we get involved, we are bound by, there's certain key stages which are set out in legislation, but Hackney does go above and beyond in terms of that engagement process, and we look to really try and introduce additional stages, particularly in the front end of the process, as we develop plans. The feedback's is really important. It informs each stage of plan preparation. So when we go out to consultation and we receive all of the comments back at each stage, we collate those responses and that they are published then in consultation reports at each stage, so the community can see how their involvement and their input has shaped each stage of the plan making process. And we will set out clearly how we've responded to the comments and how that is then informed the next stage of the plan. In terms of how we consult the community, it tends to vary depending on the type of plan that we're producing. There are key things that we do at each stage, but I think it also does depend on really understanding what the community makeup is and kind of what the topics that we are consulting on. But there are a range of methods that we use. We work very closely with the communications team, as well as the area regeneration and the wider service, to ensure that we deliver the most kind of effective methods. And just to give you an idea of what we do, it's both kind of virtual, but also printed methods of consultation. We use a wide range of methods, from face-to-face to meetings, drop-ins, walking tours, workshops. A lot of this too we learn from previous consultation. So where things have tended to work quite well and we've obtained positive feedback from the community, we look to then shape that through our engagement strategies that we work and develop with the comms team. Can you see the images? They're just loading.
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. So yeah, this is just to give you a flavour of some of the consultations that we've been undertaking with the area regeneration colleagues in developing these plans. So we do a wide range of events. We tend to find, some really positive feedback and great involvement, certainly when we tie in with other events that are taking place in the area. But yeah, we've had really good sort of feedback as well obtained through events taking place at the market. So there's examples here of Ridley Road Market, Hoxton Market. That's for Shoreditch Plan, Ridley Road for Dalston Plan. We've done a number of drop-in sessions as well, which have been really successful in getting a wide range of views. I think that's obviously very important too, that we have a good cross-section of views representing the communities in which we're preparing these plans for. And there's a photo here to highlight the kind of work undertaken with the children and young people in Hackney in developing the child-friendly places supplementary planning document. So yeah, it was really exciting engagement, way of engaging with young people and shaping that plan. The community panels. So we're always looking to explore ways in which we can enhance and improve our engagement methods with the community as we develop plans. And one in which way we've done that is quite pioneering in setting up a community panel. And we've had lots of success in doing so. The first community panel was set up for Stamford Hill. It's actually recognised by the RTPI in terms of how successful it was in terms of helping to bring communities together, and the role of this panel. So it's a good cross section of community members from residents, businesses, local organisations, along with councillors and council officers. And a real objective is ensuring that the council is delivering effective consultation methods and ensuring that that a wide range of views are taken into account in the plan making process. So we have a number of panels established. So Stamford Hill is the first, but we've replicated that because it has been successful, and we have had lots of positive feedback from members. So we've replicated that for other plans. Just touching on community engagement in the development management process. So the council is very committed to publicising and consulting widely on planning applications as they come in, and there's a range of methods again in which we do that. Some examples provided on screen, but there's also early engagement is certainly encouraged. So those conversations are had with developers early on in the planning process to ensure that they are kind of engaging the community there, and that all comments and feedback that raise material planning considerations are considered by the council in determining the planning application. So we work very collaboratively with our colleagues in area regeneration. As you can see from the earlier slides, these area-based plans really do set out a positive both planning and regeneration strategy for the area. And so we work closely with Area Regen along with the wider service areas to deliver those plans through a range of area action plans and SPDs. And these plans also embed other corporate strategies, to mention the community strategy, but very importantly, the inclusive economy strategy. And there is scope to prepare regeneration plans and strategies without status, in addition to or instead of the area-based planning documents. So I think Suzanne will talk a little bit more about Hatton Central and kind of the approach we're taking there. I think it's important to highlight that we do have distinctive roles in terms of the implementation of this policy and how we ensure the delivery of the policies and that growth, and how we work with key stakeholders such as businesses in particular in terms of delivering the objectives of the policies and kind of any projects that are identified, and including the site allocations that I mentioned. So I think I'll now hand over to Suzanne, who can talk about community engagement and area regeneration.
Thanks, Katie. I'm happy to share my screen, and you can bring the slides down so that you don't have to flick through them. Okay.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes. Oh, no. We can see you.
Oh.
It's not going up. Yeah, there we are, Suzanne.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, thank you for inviting me and Area Regen to talk to Scrutiny Commission this evening. Before I get into the slides, I'll just do a brief intro, a bit about Area Regen, which I'm sure most of you know already, but I'll just do a recap and just let you know what I'm going to cover this evening. So I think, like I say, as most people know, Area Regen is focused on kind of physical, social and economic regeneration in the borough on a kind of area, place-based, taking an area, place-based approach, focused on our priority areas. And these tend to be the areas where there's kind of most need and most opportunity. And in line with the presentation that Katie's just given, very linked up with the local plan. And the growth strategy and the areas of change and opportunity identified in the local plan are generally the areas that Area Regeneration is kind of focused on. That's not to say we don't look at other kind of town centres and parts of the borough that we do. I would just say that the kind of focus and the main programmes are centred in our kind of key town centres, quite a few of which I'm going to kind of talk about tonight. And we do high streets, and we look at businesses, we look at economic development and strategy, workspace, new homes, public realm schemes, culture, the list goes on. So it really is, you know, a real broad range of interventions, projects and programmes that we might consider in any one of these areas. But the crucial thing is we do work with the community and other stakeholders in the area to identify what our priorities are going to be and what they should be, and then make sure that we deliver then on those priorities for the community. And they could be, the delivery could be done by Area Regeneration, it could be done by another service area working with Area Regeneration, or it could be done externally, but my team will generally know about it and make sure it comes back and links in with the overall plan for an area. And what I'm hoping to illustrate tonight with the presentation is that our community engagement in the work that Area Regeneration do is effectively, I guess, threefold. So you've got what Katie just ran through in terms of the kind of work with planning to really set the high level kind of planning guidance for an area. So we work very closely with planning on that, the strategic planning team. And then we'll also have we could have area-based kind of regeneration plans or strategies that would effectively sit underneath the local plan that may not be planning documents. And again, we'll do a lot of engagement and working with the local community and local stakeholders on those. And then when we get down to the individual project level, where we're kind of delivering regeneration projects that have come out of that overall strategy and that engagement for a place, again, there'll be individual engagement with local stakeholders as appropriate on the individual projects and programmes as well. So I'll talk a bit about that in relation to what we're doing in different areas, and hopefully just kind of illustrate those kind of, I guess, different stages and different levels of engagement that are built into the process. So, and also please forgive me, I might have to take some sips of water. I've had a cold over the weekend, which is going now, but I may still be slightly croaky. So if I sip some water, please do bear with me. So we'll start with Hatton Central, which is one of our kind of priority regeneration areas. The reason it is that it's a major town centre, so it's identified in the local plan as such, and also a kind of area for growth and change. It's the civic and cultural heart of the borough. It's got heritage assets, it's got a kind of thriving evening economy. At the same time, it's a relatively deprived area of the borough. And I should say, I've not brought up the indices of multiple deprivation map in this presentation, but again, generally, most of the areas that we focus on will be, you know, relatively deprived compared to other parts of the borough and indeed London and the UK. Indices of multiple deprivation aren't a kind of perfect tool to consider kind of deprivation issues. There's a lot of other things that we need to take into account, but they are one of the most tried and tested methods to provide a quick picture on levels of deprivation in different communities. In Hackney Central as well, we have kind of several underutilised council-owned sites which are allocated in the local plan for new homes and new jobs. So there's an opportunity there by the fact that the council does own quite a lot of land in Hackney Central that could be doing more and could be doing better for our kind of residents and the business community. We obviously want to link the regeneration with the inclusive economy strategy and a fair recovery. So we want to create new affordable homes, affordable workspace, more jobs, transport improvements, community infrastructure, improved public realm, etc. And so in addition to the kind of planning document that exists for Hackney Central, which is the Hackney Central Master Plan, SPD, my team are going to develop, or are currently developing, a town centre strategy, which is not going to be a planning document, but will kind of look to the planning document and complement it with a bit more of a focus on the kind of economic priorities for the town centre, and certainly a lot of detail on kind of delivery and the priorities over the next kind of 5 to 10 years for what we, the council, are going to work to deliver directly ourselves or deliver with our partners in Hackney Central. And very important to note is that the strategy has been co-designed with residents and stakeholders. So I'll say a bit more about that on the next slide. And yeah, delivery is going to be key, as well as monitoring the impact and outcomes of what we put into the strategy. So we're at a fairly early stage of this, but I think it's important to say that it's not just about kind of developing strategies and delivering projects, you know, for the sake of it, or because people have asked us to, which may be enough for some people. They're happy that their project is being developed and that the council is listening. But what we are putting in place is a really robust monitoring framework that really wants to kind of track the impact and outcomes of what we're doing to make sure, you know, so we can see that it is making a difference. So in terms of our approach to engagement in Hackney Central, Katie may have touched a bit on this already, but we ran the Hackney Central conversation. So the conversations you might have heard of in both Dalston and Hackney Central, we've ran these, and they've been really popular and a good and quick and easy way for many people to respond to what they like, what they dislike about their local area, what they would want to see changed or improved, or what they want to stay the same and what they value. So we had over 2,000 responses. We had one-to-one conversations, drop-in sessions, public events. I mean, I think it's clear to say, and I think we've published the report online now for this, so that's available on the Hackney Central webpage on the council's website. The key issues seem to be focused on kind of public realm, community safety, transport, kind of improving the roads and the streets, and making sure that we make the most of our kind of local economy and make the most of the town centre. So via the town centre strategy that I've mentioned in the previous slide, we're effectively continuing this conversation. So over the next kind of 6 to 8 months, we'll be holding more events, more engagement around what could go into the town centre strategy, building upon what conversation we've already had, kind of checking in with people with what they said is still the case, given that COVID has happened since we first launched the conversation. And all these issues that people are telling us about in Hackney Central will make it into the town centre strategy and will effectively form the focus for what the council does in Hackney Central for the next kind of 5 to 10 years. So it's a really important piece of engagement to guide what the council does next in Hackney Central alongside the planning document, the Hackney Central Master Plan. We've set up a community panel for Hackney, so it's got a diverse membership. I think we're about 15 to 20 members of the panel, and they're really key for us. They're made up of residents, businesses, other local stakeholders. And their role is to feed into the panel, but also to ensure that they disseminate what they've heard and what they're doing in the panel to a wider audience, to their wider networks. So the panel is already up and running. I think it's certainly met twice, perhaps 3 times, and it will continue to meet as we develop our plans for Hackney Central further. And these are just a kind of snapshot of some of the kind of projects that we're either working on already or are emerging in Hackney Central. So I've mentioned the master plan, which is the planning document, town centre strategy. Hackney Central Station is already on site. I mean, I think that was a direct response to what came up in the conversation, actually. So this is a second entrance to Hackney Central Station. And through the Hackney Central conversation, this was one of the things that came up the most, about overcrowding at the station being unsafe and being very unwelcoming in terms of the entranceway. So we had an opportunity here with land that we owned, working with TfL and Network Rail to deliver a kind of new entrance to the station. So that's on site at the moment, and that will be along Amherst Road. I mentioned the council-owned sites. We're looking at what can be done on the council-owned sites. That's a very early stage. Community green space, that's a picture of the garden of Earthly Delights down there. We're looking at the Tesco site at Morning Lane with our property colleagues. Hackney Walk is a site that we don't own, but it's owned by Network Rail and the Archco. So we're working with them to ensure that whatever comes forward on that site next makes a positive contribution to the town centre. And then there's just some other organisations there that we regularly engage with. So as well as the community and kind of resident and business engagement, there's a lot of engagement ongoing and regular with our key stakeholders in the town centre, because they all need to be involved in this to ensure that we can actually deliver what the community's priorities are for the area. So I'll just move on to Dalston. I mean, I think in terms council owns a decent amount of land and sites in that area, and it's also set out in the local plan where as an area where kind of growth will happen and where new homes and jobs will be accommodated. So we're working with planning and other colleagues to kind of take forward the Dalston plan, which Katie talked about a lot, so I won't cover that in too much detail. But also alongside the Dalston plan is a kind of the delivery of what we are focused on is the development of the Dalston plan with strategic planning, but also the delivery in Dalston. So ensuring that area regen are kind of already delivering on projects that people have told us are priorities for them, but also coming up with a programme of future kind of priorities and projects that the council either will again deliver directly or deliver with our stakeholders. So again, I think we've covered some of this already, but the Dalston Conversation was launched back in 2018. Again, the kind of report on that is available on our website, and I was just looking at it earlier today actually myself because I needed to check something for my work. So it was useful to have the chance to just go in and have a look and remind myself what people said. We had about 5,000 people that took part in the conversation. Again, we had a Dalston panel, and the key issues that were raised by residents in Dalston, residents, businesses, etc., were really about making sure that Ridley Road Market is protected and existing traders are supported, and kind of strong support for the library, the Eastern Curve Garden, a need for better walking and cycling routes and public transport. Some concerns around Gillette Square came through quite strongly, and making sure that the community are a key part of everything that we do in the future of Dalston. So those are the kind of key things that came up through that conversation. And as part of that kind of, and again, a kind of early priority and kind of delivery area for area regen in Dalston has been improvements to Ridley Road and Ashwin Street. So some of you may be aware that this is a kind of public realm scheme that's been led by Area Regeneration, working in partnership with Street Scene and Markets. And we received some funding from the Mayor of London to make some public realm improvements to Ridley Road and Ashwin Street, as well as delivering new kind of market stalls for the traders, handheld card machines for the traders, Wi-Fi on Ridley Road. So that's a good example of where a project's really quite advanced and that started on site. And what we've done with that, with the kind of designs, because we procured an architect who worked on the designs for the scheme, and we made sure that we did all that in kind of co-design and consultation with market traders, Ashwin Street businesses, visitors to the market, local residents, etc. So that scheme is a good example of where a project comes forward and we do further consultation on the detail of that particular regeneration project and ensure that it goes through several more rounds of really detailed engagement and consultation to make sure that we've got that scheme right. So we've done a lot on that in terms of kind of feedback and changing the designs in response to the feedback that we've received, and we've now got a final scheme and it started on site, and that one will complete in 2022. So far everybody seems happy with it, but we've got our term contractors, Marlborough, are on site on that at the moment, so I'm sure there will be things that come up and we'll deal with them as they come up. But the good news there is that traders, residents, businesses have all seen the designs, those who wanted to, and had a chance to comment and are happy with what we're doing there. And I'll move on to Hackney Wick as well. So Hackney Wick has got a kind of vision. I'm sure most of you are well aware this area is kind of part of the LLDC's kind of area, designated area. So the Hatton Council work with Tower Hamlets and the LLDC, I guess, as our kind of key partners in this area, because that's just something that we have to do given how the structure of this area is made up, which is obviously slightly different from Dalston and Hatton Central, and actually any other part of the borough. It's unique Hackney Wick on this basis. So I won't kind of go through what's on this slide in kind of word for word, but in terms of our kind of key objectives for Hackney Wick, the council's objectives, it's about making sure that businesses can stay in the area as rents rise, and really focusing on affordable workspace, because Hackney Wick has got this reputation as a really amazing creative hub for local businesses. That's how it's kind of developed, and that's what it's famous for, and that's something that we want to kind of champion and support and do all we can to kind of retain, and we're working on a number of projects that indeed do just that. We also want to make sure that residents benefit from the development and the investment in the area through things like skills and local employment, development and training, etc. I was down there last week actually, and the scale of opportunity in Hackney Wick itself, but also just outside it with Here East and Plexhill and East Bank is vast, and I think it really is about making sure that we can work with our partners to get the most of those opportunities, to make the most of those opportunities for Hackney. Really, that's really the key priority, and improve public spaces and local facilities for our residents and businesses as well. That's another area of focus for us in Hackney Wick. And just a few examples again of kind of projects that we do kind of do more detailed engagement and working with the local community on. We've got a project at the moment which is in the kind of middle picture, which is upgrading the multi-use games area and creating a new kind of classroom for Young Hackney to run at the old Baths building, which is a council-owned building in Hackney Wick. So that kind of was co-designed. You can see a co-design session there with young people to make sure that young people had the chance to contribute into the design of that facility. And that responds directly to a report that was commissioned in Hackney Wick, which is called Hackney Wick Through Young Eyes, where young people said there just wasn't sufficient kind of youth facilities and sports facilities in the area for young people. So this is us responding directly to that kind of consultation really, and making sure that we can do something about that through our kind of regeneration programme. And this will be the first kind of Young Hackney facility in Hackney Wick. So we're really pleased with that. It should be finished hopefully later this year and be able to be in use because that's on site at the moment. Another programme we're running in Hackney Wick is the Creative Enterprise Zone programme. So this is a partnership with the Mayor of London and kind of part funded by the Mayor of London, as well as partnership with Tower Hamlets Council and also the London Legacy Development Corporation. So this is all about kind of supporting, retaining and growing creative businesses in the area. I won't say too much more on this because I've got a funny feeling Alex may talk on this in her presentation, but it's very much about ensuring that the Creative Enterprise Zone programme delivers what we want it to in terms of affordable workspace, opportunities for people to work with the creative industries, to get into the creative sector, and it's about making sure that that's kind of managed and led by a strong consortium of local stakeholders, both businesses and residents. That's key to the programme. So I'll move down. And then this is again another good example of a very kind of detailed project that's come out of the wider kind of strategy and the wider kind of regeneration approach to Hackney Wick, which is Gainsborough Bridge. So I'm sure all of you are probably familiar with this. Certainly some kind of councillors will be very familiar with Gainsborough Bridge. So it's a kind of obviously a pedestrian cycle bridge over the canal, going across the canal there, and it's been closed effectively ever since it was built, and it's only used at the minute by the local school, and it's always been the intention to open it for public use, but we were aware obviously there's some controversy around that. just because local residents were concerned about the impact on their amenity. So it was really important that we did quite a lot of, again, public engagement around the opening of the bridge. So we did that, I think it was pre the pandemic. We carried out quite a long engagement exercise on a kind of access strategy for the bridge and effectively opening it up to the public. And that came back that 81% of residents or respondents were in favour of opening the bridge for public use. So I guess that's just a very high level summary, because this project has been reasonably complex, and there's been a lot of kind of individual engagement and discussions that we've had as a result of kind of our plans to open the bridge. But ultimately, following the survey, following the engagement, we were able to submit those results to the LLDC planning team, because they needed to give that approval for the bridge to be opened. And they were satisfied that the council had done the engagement and had the evidence that local people were happy that the bridge could be opened. So that again is on track to be opened, I think hopefully either this month or next month. So again, just another example of a very detailed kind of individual project that my service area would work on in the context of the kind of wider regeneration kind of plans and vision for an area. And I think that's it. Thank you. That's my presentation over.
Thank you, Suzanne, Natalie and Katie. Natalie, did you have any further comments to say at all on the presentation?
No, I don't think so. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Before we move to members' questions, I'd like to invite Alex Russell from Hackney Wick Development Trust to talk about the project within Hackney Wick.
Thank you, Chair. Am I sharing my screen in the way that the others did, or Tim, are you doing the slides? I can do either way.
Whatever works best for you, please, Alex.
It might be better if I do my own slides,
Okay.
just because I can stay in control. And hello to a few people that I know on this call, like Gilbert, who used to be my neighbour. Hello, and Nick, who we work closely with in Hackney Wick. Hold on, I'm trying to talk and do two things at once. 1 second. Here we go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Everybody see that? I think I might have got the name of the committee wrong. Anyway, here we are, beautiful picture of Hackney Wick, and this feels quite seamless really from the presentation we had before from the planning and regen team. So yeah, we are Hackney Wick and Fish Island Community Development Trust. We're a small organisation that was birthed from the creative sector. But it has a kind of broader community representation now from all corners of our community, and so we're a community-led organisation, and we're very much sort of place-based focused in Hackney Wick and Fish Island area. We were created really because many sort of social entrepreneurs, I suppose, in the area, working in the area, living in the area, were feeling very nervous about development and the intensification of development and what that meant, what that means, and what that meant for the sort of community and sort of social impact activities and interventions that they were delivering and working with partners to do. And that nervousness around the impact of development and what that means for the creative industries, but other kind of community activities and some communities that are sort of marginalised often when change happens in an area is still a kind of, you know, a hard issue that we kind of grapple with. So the trust was established to look at ways in which the community could become a stakeholder in the place and actually take on kind of responsibility for owning, managing spaces and places in the area, so that we can curate as we see fit. We can have an influence in what's going on here, and we can change and adapt according to what the needs of the community are really. So our ambition is really about being an ethical landlord for the long term. We're not interested so much in short-term operation of buildings and assets and sites. We're very much interested in finding ways in which we can establish ourselves as this long-term partner within the area. And that's not an easy ambition to fulfill because we have very little money. We have some funding from the LLDC to start this project. We have support from various places, including Hackney Council, actually. But we are, a minnow organisation, but we do have big ambitions. So that's just a bit of sort of a context of who we are. We do loads of engagement with our community, and it's kind of a daily sort of, a daily interaction. And we do that because we need to have validity. I mean, if I talk to LLDC or Hackney Council or Tower Hamlets about asset transfer or, any of those sorts of conversations, it doesn't stack up if I can't justify that we can talk on behalf of the sort of number of communities here. And obviously not everybody agrees with everything, but we've got a broad consensus about the types of things that we think are needed here, and we come with that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. It obviously gives us a huge amount of insight as to what is needed, what activities, what types of space use is needed, everything from skateboards to artist studios to well-being centres, libraries, everything is talked about. We need to remain relevant. Where's the deficit? Who's not being served? How are they not being served? How can we make an intervention? And also, we think it's really important that we engage with people because we want them to feel that they're part of this movement and that they're part of a change and a transformation, and that they're part of being a stakeholder. So it can't just be a group of us, it has to be a broad parish of people. This is a snapshot of the organisations that we engage with on a kind of daily, weekly basis. And there's an army of volunteers. I mean, I'm a sort of paid member of staff, and I'm 2 days a week. And most of it relies on people giving their time as part of this movement because they really believe in it. The organisations in the grey boxes are kind of largely based in the area or have a stake in the area. The ones in the kind of pinky box are mostly people who sort of work outside of the area, but all have expertise and specialisms that support our mission and provide us with information about how to build our proposals, how to make relationships, how to negotiate, how to fundraise, all of those things that we need. So I think the thing to take away from this is that we really much see, the local authorities and the developers and the joint ventures and all of the housing associations, the institutions of like universities and things that are here, as much a partnership and as part of this as the community voices as well. And we very much see our role and where we want to kind of sit in this is that is to kind of bring all of these groups together on stuff that's relevant to the different to the different residents and organisations. So we're very much trying to bring people together. We're not trying to only speak from a resident voice. We're wanting to understand what's going on with local authorities so that we can build really strong, lasting partnerships. So we work with people in sort of a number of different ways. There's kind of formal partnerships where we're looking to deliver very specific things, and the Creative Enterprise Zone is one of those, touched on by Suzanne, thank you. We're really proud about being a Creative Enterprise Zone. The CDT was one of the organisations that helped Enterprise Zone, and a number of our directors are also part of the CEZ. We have a memorandum of understanding with them where we support each other's mission, and actually Hackney Council Regen team were really helpful in enabling that to happen. We see ourselves as a sort of legacy vehicle for the creative enterprise zone, because the partnership has a time limit, and we are trying to set ourselves up as not having a time limit. So we very much want to develop that partnership so that we can continue the great work that gets developed through the CEZ. And actually, we feel that if we can establish ourselves as an asset holding landlord, then we can generate income from that model that can support some of the activities of the CEZ long term. The Creative Land Trust is the CLT. Sorry, that's an acronym. And that is a London-wide organisation that's set up to support affordable workspace, and we have they have bought their first building in Hackney Wick, which we're really pleased about, and they have a very long lease there. And we have an MOU with them, and we support each other's mission, and they've been very helpful in providing us with information about business plans and things. We have developed a number of partnerships through a high street for all funding application that we were successful with the GLA, which includes a number of the partners that were on the previous slide. And we are looking to get more funding from the GLA. Submission goes in at the end of this week for to support a circular economy high street, which builds on the great work that's being done in Hackney Wick by a lot of the creative sector, but also kind of social entrepreneurs who are responding to the climate emergency. We have a great many organisations that are already delivering in this space, and we are looking to scale up what's being done, coordinate that, work with local authorities and the partners on the ground to ensure we've got the right resources in the right places, and that we can coordinate some of that activity. And actually, again, I will say that Hackney Council has been very helpful in accommodating some of that work and supporting a lot of that work. We're developing relationships around community-led housing as well, and we see ourselves as an organisation that can provide and develop new products in this area. We've got a relationship with Eastwick and Sweetwater, who are building out a whole new neighbourhood on the Olympic Park. Their policy is to build some community-led housing. They need a local partner. We're looking to, be that anchor organisation that can work with residents who have a particular need and develop a product. So I'm not going to go through the whole piece, but you get the picture of where we are in the landscape and how we kind of work with people. There's obviously our governance model, which is made up of all community members, and we have a vast array of networks and informal relationships, and we are constantly in conversation with all of these groups and more about what's going on, so that we can understand and be responsive. This is the type of engagement that we do. It's a lot of it is what you'd expect, but we are small, so we don't have lots of boards and lots of tech and things like that the council has. We have to work with and through partners most of the time. The most effective engagement we've done is with a whole load of youth organisations locally, to look at what is the youth perspective on a circular high street and circular economy, and how do they reimagine the high street. And we've had some fascinating insight, and we're actually developing a group of young leaders to then work with us on the next stage of our circular economy plans. So that's all very exciting. So we followed this sort of broad kind of methodology, and we do a kind of a range of different things. We do try to work with what our strengths. So we have a lot of people who work in the creative sector. So this is a good example of this is the People Speak, where they were doing a kind of radio show, talkie-okie they call it, and this is in Felstead Square. And people just walk past, and then they can get handed a mic, and they get have a debate with people, and it's fantastic, and that all gets kind of written up. We put it to music, so it just becomes much more engaging and interesting for people. But I mean, and there's lots of other things I could talk about, but I think that's just a sort of snapshot of the type of things that we do. we don't. I mean, I think the kind of measuring our success is we're building an organisation here. We're building a kind of framework, and we're asking for big sort of systemic change in many ways. And so we just, what we want to do is build our parish and build the network and make sure that we stay relevant. So we capture information, and then when we try to respond to that, we build that into our projects. But it's all about the outcomes. Can we get an asset at the end of the day? Does it stack up? Can we write really good proposals based on the insight that we've gathered? Can we take people with us? Can we deliver really great impact that people want in the local area? So we're at that stage of development. We're probably not as sophisticated as the council in terms of what is done there. But I think if you remain connected to people and you can kind of keep you involved and keep communicating about what's going on, then that bit is easier, I think, and probably easier for a small organisation like us. Lessons learned. I think, residents and community groups are more sophisticated than we think. They know a lot about, regeneration. They know it's good, it's bad, it's in between. They in my experience, a lot of them are really interested in getting under the skin of what it all means and how they can get more involved, and are have a lot to contribute. I would say this, we're coming from a place which is, we want to be a partner, a long-term partner, a long-term steward, and so. And the people we work with and the people who want to work with us are people who've got a lot of skills and experience who want to contribute in that domain. So I completely accept that not everybody wants to do that. Some people want to come to a stall and give an opinion and they trust that it will be acted on. I suppose we're operating in a slightly different kind of domain, which is we want quite a lot of involvement. That means we work on really building trust. We look at how roles people can play. We make sure there's a lot of conversation about how we're going to do things. We do things together. So we're always looking at ways in which we can build capacity. So I think I think the council, in my experience, and LLDC sort of are really alive to that, and and there is a willingness to want to support that sort of way of working. Not sure we've completely cracked how we do it. I think we're getting there, but I think we can look at that. And then this is kind of the kind of summation of what I've kind of said, really. What we're all about is moving from being kind of the consultee, the passive beneficiary, it being a short term, or what do you think about this? And then, don't leave it to us guys, we'll sort it out, to being a partner, having some responsibility and accountability for delivering, and, building that capacity within our community that's already exists there, coordinating it, making sure it's collaborative, and that people are working together. And how we think we can work. We are working, but I think it's just worth for this audience just being really clear about that. I suppose I've said, principally this is about trying to get hold of some of the asset and take ownership ourselves. And I'm working hand in hand with the authorities. We think we can do a lot more in terms of when we have an asset and we've got a self-sustaining model, that we can support more local groups and residents in whatever capacity that may be, whether that's in the affordable creative workspace, or whether that's in well-being and health, or education. We're pretty broad, but we think we can play a role, and we can support the councils in delivering some of those sorts of services. we think we could play a role in neighbourhood forum planning and all the stuff that was spoken about at the beginning. We're having lots. We're slightly different, I suppose, because we talk a lot to LLDC in that context, and that relationship is really starting to develop. But I think formal way of doing that and having that like properly resourced would be something we'd be interested to have a conversation about. And we think we can be a provocator, and we can talk about what's going right, what's going wrong, how can we change things, look at innovative solutions. We can take risks, we can ask difficult questions, and I think that's kind of healthy in this sort of democracy that we're in at the moment. So hopefully that's given a bit of a background to us, and I can take more questions of detail. So I will stop sharing. I can go back to any slides if anybody wants.
Thank you, Alex. That's very helpful, and just to see the examples of how proactive you are in your community engagement work and bringing all lots of different voices together. If I could kick off with a question along that line for both you, Alex, and also officers too. Are there any demographics within the resident that are underrepresented, do you feel, in the resident engagement that you've done so far? And how have you planned or worked to try and engage those groups that you want to reach? Alex, if I start off with yourself, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think this is you never. I don't think you ever get to the end with this sort of engagement, and for us, it's an ever evolving sort of thing to be mindful of. I wouldn't say that we have a sort of like a list of groups that we haven't reached them, or we haven't reached that. Our first sort of point was to try and get us sort of reach as many different kind of groups through other existing networks that we're working with, and hear from them about what's going on. So that's kind of been first base. I think, could we honestly say that we're reaching people like the refugee community or the traveller community, or people with serious kind of health issues, or that there are so many sort of segregated groups within our community. I definitely wouldn't say we have reached those that are where regeneration is just not a priority. They've got all these other things going on in their lives, grappling with poverty, energy bills, trying to get a job, those sorts of things. And I think that it's something which we're always kind of alive to. I would say that one of the areas that we're looking at in terms of the sort of high street and the housing is particularly around sort of youth, like young people, and we know that a lot of young people feel quite excluded from the kind of infrastructure changes that go on in their community, and that was played out, I think, with Suzanne saying with the research that's been done. So we have made a very conscious effort to do quite a lot of deep engagement with that group of people, and we've done that through working with other partners, and it's been really powerful and massively shaped the response that we've given to the GLA. So we've learned a lot from doing that experience. But no, are we reaching everybody? Have we got plans to do that? I mean, certainly over time, definitely, and I wouldn't say at all that we are anywhere near getting to where we need to be on that sort of side of things.
Thank you, Alex. I mean, just to follow on from that, I had the pleasure of meeting David Adesanya the other day, who started to talk to you about the Hackney Wick Town Hall, which I was very intrigued by, and I didn't really have time to follow up with him, and I've got his contact details and I am going to follow up. So that's just a nice link.
Good. Yeah, he's fantastic.
It'd be great to hear about Hackney Wick Town Hall, but I think I will go to officers now and ask the same question. So are there any main demographics that are underrepresented, do you feel, in terms of our resident engagement? when we just talk more generally of, you know, planning and area regeneration. That could be a question for both Suzanne and Natalie.
Thanks, Chair. I've had my hand up. I'm not sure you can see. You probably can't see
Oh,
my hand,
I'm not
can you,
looking
in me?
Yes, I can see your hand.
I'll speak up. Yeah, I was just following on from what Alex was saying, really. One of the key demographics that we've been doing a lot of work on to engage with is children and young people, particularly around some of the area-based work that we've been doing, and through the child-friendly places supplementary planning document that was adopted by Council in the summer. Katie, do you want to say a bit more about some of the work that we've been doing on that?
Yeah, sure, Natalie. Yeah, so yeah, this is an area that we've been looking into a lot, both in terms of development of the area-based plans and the child-friendly places SPD. And we did a lot of work and specifically commissioned Dina Borna of ZCD Architects, which is paving the way in sort of child-friendly development, to help us develop a youth engagement strategy for the SPD. So what that then involved was we undertook a series of workshops with Hackney Youth Parliament in helping to sort of develop the child-friendly principles and the design guidance that is now being adopted. And that was a really successful, I think, process, and it really highlighted how important and how valuable the voices and the kind of ideas and kind of the concerns of young people are in Hackney, and how they can shape planning guidance as it comes forward. And we're looking to, as part of reviewing the Statement of Community Involvement, which I mentioned earlier, which is our policy around how we engage, is reflecting on the work that we've done with young people and building that in to the SCIs to ensure that we not only engage young people through the planning and plan making processes, but also ensuring through engagement of strategies just more widely as a council, that we listen to and bring in young people, and their views are really important in shaping the policy development and strategy development.
Thank you, Katie, for that.
Yeah.
What I'll do now is Suzanne, did you want to say?
I was going to mention it's kind of the same. It's the young people and the work that kind of through the conversations with the Hatton Central and the Dawson conversations, we've tried to make sure that we've kind of have specific sessions on young people, with young people around that. And I think what you'll see if you go on to the conversation reports that I mentioned on the website, again, there's a kind of demographic profile in each of those reports as well. So for each consultation that we do, we kind of look at kind of who's responded. I was just actually having a look at the Dawson conversation report, and actually, you know, in terms of the kind of ethnicity of respondents, it was kind of the majority was kind of white respondents to that particular conversation report. So it's certainly something that I think in future, you know, with all our consultation exercises, we just need to make sure that we are reaching those groups. As Alex mentioned, people with kind of long-term health issues, you know, just may not be top of their priority to get involved in this type of consultation. And it would be obviously part of an ongoing piece of work for us is to make sure we are as participatory and inclusive as possible.
Thank you, Suzanne. Have members got any questions on this particular point? No, Sam? Sorry, Councillor Palace. Did you have a question on this particular point?
I do have a question on this particular point. It kind of follows off, and I've got a kind of question in a quick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I've got a question and then just a quick follow up about it. So, I've been very involved in the Stamford Hill plan, as Natalie will know, and officers, to bring the community together in the way that they have done has been no mean task. I just wanted to ask about how do we kind of ensure that community panels are representative? What is that process, and how can we kind of, going forward, is there any best practice I just think, maybe taken away from the Stamford experience or other area action plans. I've got a follow-up question after this, but I'd just like to put that out there first.
Okay.
Would you like me to respond to that initially?
Yes, Natalie, please.
I think that's kind of diversity within the panels is probably the easier bit, because we can control who we invite and we can make sure that we try to engage with as many different people as possible. I think the challenge comes with then who actually responds to consultations and how we then monitor that and make sure that that's then translated into actually getting the feedback from those meetings. But I know that for all of the panels that we've set up, and we've got many of them now. I think Stamford Hill was the first one, and then we replicated that in Shoreditch, and then more recently in Dalston and Hackney Central. That is definitely something that we always look at, and it evolves over time as well, because the membership often, after a time changes, and you have new people that then become involved. And I think it's really important just to keep monitoring it and making sure that they remain diverse, and you've got the full community represented as the panels evolve and grow, really. And Suzanne's also been, I think you mentioned Hackney Central in particular, Suzanne, in terms of diversity there. Did you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, that's fine. I think, as Natalie said, the panels, when we're setting the community panels, that's the kind of, in effect, the easier bit, because we invite kind of people who are interested, but we also can then make sure it's representative of the wider community through the kind of selection of people on those panels to make sure it is as diverse and inclusive as possible. And I think then the more difficult bit is then, when we're engaging outside of panels, is how to ensure, people want to engage. So we can make it everything available for people to engage, the information can be there, but it's kind of how to get them to engage. And I think there was a lot of work done in Dalston, and it's now been done in Hackney Central around kind of us going to people. So, that's it. That's what I think the solution is. You've got the panels, and then you've got the kind of more standard engagement where things are available online or in libraries or whatever. But then I think there is quite a lot to do around us just identifying who we need to go to. So who are the key people in the community that we won't be able to kind of access via these methods, and making sure that we then kind of visit those, whether it's a kind of group of young people, whether it's a group of elderly residents, or any other kind of group that may not typically respond. And there will be a lot of good examples of where we've gone out to different groups as part of Dalston and Hackney Central that I'm happy to provide and share. I probably don't have all the groups that were involved as a list off the top of my head, but if that's required, then yeah, definitely, or of interest, then we'd be happy to provide that. But I think it's a really good question, and a very kind of a really important one for us to bear in mind, all of us, around who we're engaging with, and who we need to make sure we do even more with, as all of these projects, all of these kind of plans continue to emerge. So it's just a useful.
Can I just ask a follow up, just as a potential idea that may have been looked at by the planning department before? In Australia, they had citizens' juries as kind of part of planning processes. I know that this has been looked at by different political parties. I was just wondering whether the council has considered, for area action plans in particular, for community panels, to potentially look at citizen juries which directly reflect the census. Because I think from my own experience, there sometimes does come questions about who is on the panel and who they exactly are representing, and exactly how that comes about. And I think, on the Stamford panel, there has been a good mix, and there's been, there was 2 neighbourhood plans and bringing it together. But I just wonder going forward whether something like a kind of a jury model might potentially counteract some of the questions that come around about how are said people, you know, selected, and I think you'd have to, you know, look at places which obviously have implemented that model and what context have done it, and of course I don't think that should necessarily take away from our elected structures, but I think maybe on an AAP community panel that could potentially be something that maybe could be explored further.
Okay, any comments on that at all, Suzanne or Natalie?
Happy to come in, Chair. It's definitely something we could look at. Thanks for that, Councillor Palace. I'd need to probably understand a bit more about it and how it would work and how it would work with the scale of the community panels. So obviously they're normally around kind of somewhere between 10 and 15, sometimes a bit bigger members. So whether that's possible within that kind of smaller group. Yeah, but it's something that we could definitely look at. I think with the panels, it's really important that you know, we have maybe a process whereby we review the membership every now and then, just to make sure it is still representative of the community. Really, the role of these panels is to further get the message out there. So they're not necessarily representing, the members aren't necessarily representing people in the community, but they're helping us get the message out. So we often want people that not only represent the mix in the community, but also are able to kind of be ambassadors to the plan and, you know, share the message and you know, encourage other people to get involved. So it's obviously another key element of it. Yeah, I'm not sure whether just linking it directly to the census would get the diversity that we need, but definitely worth looking into, and I'm happy to take that away and explore it more.
Thank you, Natalie. So we'll take that as a follow-up action, and also for Suzanne to send the consultation demographics through. Now, Councillor Stopps has also got a question on this topic, and then I'll throw it out to members.
I mean, you've explored it a lot, really, but it is so important. I think I looked at the Hackney Central conversation, and the dominant thing that comes out to me is household respondents' home ownership, and 45% are buying their home on a mortgage, and 15% owned outright. So clearly, I would like to know whether that was representative of Hackney Central. I suspect it probably isn't. Now, I know this is a really difficult task, and it's great that you go out and stand in the Mayor Street and talk to people. And this is good stuff. But what I think it needs setting aside, the report needs those, you know, it needs data as well as, you know, there's some sort of speech bubbles as to what people have said. So it needs some hard data as well as the sort of the commonplace type stuff as well, I think, because it's just going to be those people who can come along and articulate themselves better than others, and you know, we are amongst that group. So yes, it's yeah. Three of us have talked about it, and I think it's really important that we do get some thoughts on that.
Okay, and any, you know, lessons learned, you know, from the conversation in Hackney Wick as well, and I'm sure you're kind of sharing those recommendations to help us reach our communities much more thoroughly. Okay, what I'll do is I'll open it out to members now. I know, so Councillor Smith has got his hand up. Hang on, Councillor Smith. I had Councillor Lufkin first, so I will take a question from Councillor Lufkin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Well, I was wondering, since we've got two experienced councillors, one from Hackney Wick and one from Hackney Central, what they thought about the whole process, and if they thought, have they had any recommendations that we could think about since you've been involved in it?
So,
sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm not sure I've been involved in it. I was invited to, I sort of pushed myself forward into the Hackney conversation when I'd been to a meeting of the panel. But we're certainly not front and centre at all. We just, it's happening over there somewhere, and you sort of know it's happening, but it's not a councillor thing.
Okay, so but your recommendation, the one thing that you've learned to is to involve more of the community, particularly, frankly, people who rent their home, things like that.
Just reading the report, one, you know, if you were to take that report on its own as representative of Hatton Central, you know, it will be different. It isn't representative of the residents of Hackney Central. It's representative of those people who have filled out surveys, etc. And that is you know, I'm as guilty as that myself in my employment. When I was employed, you know, it's so easy to do a survey, and yeah, so it's got to be balanced with the real data. I think that's the key. And ideally, things like Sam is talking about, but of course, you know, good market research costs a lot of money, you know, and but it needs to be open in, you know, as to what the limits are of some of this approach.
Do you want to make any comments, Councillor Shaw?
Well, just on Hackney, we don't actually have an area consultation mechanism, as like Hackney Central and Dalston. We've been, I've got obviously no criticism of officers involving us on an ad hoc basis throughout. Indeed, the regeneration manager there has kept us very well informed and involved. I think it probably lacks a more formal setting that we could have reviewed some of this, because the issue for me here is that this regeneration model focuses well on certain issues like the creative enterprise zone, but of course 2/3 of Hackney Wick is not in the creative zone, and there are real needs outside it. And one of the issues I wanted to raise, going to your point, Chair, about involving people. There are 3 communities in Hackney Wick broadly. There's the new people coming in droves, very significant developments in residential area. There's the creative sector talked about here, and there is the, if you like, long-term working class community in the estates. I mean, that's a very broad picture, but it's very difficult to see all those being represented. Alex, I think, is doing a sterling job in reaching out to these different groups. My worry is their expectations are being raised, but actually the most dynamic sector here is the residential property market that is driving land values throughout this. So we're getting a regeneration led by a particular form of residential development. And I think one of the questions we've got is, how much the regeneration model here can challenge that overwhelming force. So I think there are some big issues here that this, certainly what we're seeing here in the area regeneration is helpful. I'm not opposed to them, but it's not yet, in my view, a comprehensive view of the regeneration needs in the area.
Okay. And any comments on that, Natalie or Suzanne, at all?
If I can come in on that one, Chair. So I think, Councillor Sharman, thank you for your comments. I think the reason, I guess if it answers a question or just answers the point, I think the reason why we've not done the kind of conversation in Hackney Wick is because of the reasons you've kind of highlighted, in terms of it is quite a different area in terms of the partnerships that exist there. And I certainly think that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do something like that. And I actually have chatted to Matthew recently around the resident community in Hackney Wick, the long-term resident community there. And I feel that's an area that we do need to kind of make more inroads into, talk more to that community, and interesting obviously to hear Alex's presentation as well, and the work that the CDT are doing there. So I think it's probably around certainly taking away what you've said, and I think your points are very useful actually, and helping us develop the area regen work in Hackney Wick, working with the CDT and any other partners we have. But it's actually, it's on my list, if that gives you a bit of reassurance, because I feel like we certainly do focus on the businesses in Hackney Wick, you know, for the reasons I've set out and for the reasons Alex set out as well, because of the huge change there. But I think there is a bit on, and kind of quite a large piece on residents that we really should kind of progress actually, and that's something I'm keen to do.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'm going to take a question from Councillor Smith and then from Councillor Spence, and then we'll come back to you. And then Councillor Sharman. Okay, so Councillor Smith, then Councillor Race.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've just noticed my battery's getting a bit low.
If I could just say, because of time, if we can keep our questions quite to the point now, yeah?
Yeah, we're just focusing sort of on engagement, because there's a few separate questions I'd like to ask Alex about, specifically about Hackney Wick, but I'll just give this one to engagement. I don't know if you're going to go back to that, Chair, but I'm just pointing you. We have 89 languages spoken in Hackney, and I think what we've been talking about is basically, you know, barriers, potential barriers for engagement. So, you know, what are we doing? How are we ensuring we're reaching those hard to reach groups, such as the young people, older people, minority groups, socially excluded groups, disabled people, people with literacy and numeracy level and dominance of the oral culture, right? So we need to be thinking about how do we get through to these sort of these difficult groups. And obviously we had a census done, which I think Sam was you mentioned census earlier on, but we had a census in 21. When are the results coming back for that? Because that's quite critical. I mean, it's quite critical for us to know the sort of the makeup of the population. So at the moment, it's 40% Black and minority ethnic in Hackney, 20% Black, 7% Charidi Jewish community, 36% white. You know, how are these demographics going to shift? Because they're shifting now. We've had 700,000 people move out of London over lockdown. You know, people's aspirations are leaving their jobs, they're doing all kinds of things. How are we kind of keeping a handle on all that stuff?
Thank you.
So that's my question. You know, how are we kind of keeping up to date with all the stuff that's going on?
Okay, I'll actually come to Councillor Spence for his question first, and then we'll take both together, and then I'll do your questions together.
I wanted to ask about the price tag that goes with community involvement and the resources you need to do it effectively. And I was framing my question in terms of how it compares today with, say, 10 or 15 years ago, before austerity, before the cuts. And where today are the sort of shortfalls in terms of what you'd want to do, given the resources available to you? And what would you do tomorrow if you had more capacity in terms of community involvement?
Okay, so if I look to who would like to take that question?
Alex has a hand raised.
So Alex has got a hand up. Sorry, Alex, I will go to you first and I'll come back.
Yeah, fine. Thank you, Chair, and thanks for questions. Some of them are maybe not relevant for me, for council colleagues. I was just going to pick up on a few things. Suzanne mentioned about the idea of, I think, building on what Councillor Sharman was saying about, you know, we don't have a kind of area action policy thing that you have in other areas, and that there was a you know, that Suzanne was saying about, you know, bringing groups together or the authorities together. I think there is something about, there'll be something quite powerful about bringing LLDC, Hackney Council, and, you know, Tower Hamlets, because that does sort of include Hackney Wick, kind of together, because I think our experience is that we often having to have conversations 3 times. We do have officers that kind of sit across the authorities, and that is helpful, but I think sometimes at a more senior level we kind of need to get a number of people in the room together and have the conversation all together. We would like to be involved in that conversation, because we think we can, this kind of responds a little bit to Councillor Smith's point. You know, we think we with our networks and our contacts locally and all the organisations and groups we work with, that we can help to design programs and engagement programs to reach the different audiences that we're talking about here. And, you know, so I would advocate that there's a conversation that needs to happen with authorities about, you know, what could be done in kind of a formal, structural, strategic sense together, and sort of try and break down those silos involving some community groups. And also we can help you with that kind of engagement piece, because you sort of talk about hard to reach. I don't think people are hard to reach. I think that it's about understanding what they're interested in, and then working out what you're talking about that's going to be of interest to them. And it was really interesting because through the work we did with the High Street Fund, we were talking about circular economy and environmental strategy and how do we become greener and more sustainably, you know, sustainable area. And actually, when we talk to people in poverty, who you're talking about in terms of the groups that have been living there for a long time, a lot of them are affected by poverty. And then you start to talk about, if you talk about lofty things like, you know, sort of fancy recycling and reusing, you get a little bit, people are turned off by that. But if you talk about energy and the cost of energy and how we can change that for residents, how can we do a mass campaign to get all residents onto kind of lower, more greener, sustainable energy providers, then that people are interested in it. If you talk to young people about the circular economy, they sort of look at you a bit blankly, like this is some sort of theoretical thing that we don't really understand. But actually, when you start talking about, you know, how do you reduce the amount of traffic in the area, they say, well, we need more scooters, we need more of those sort of, like, you know, technology can support us, and they come up with ideas like that. So I think, and what we've learned is we do it with our partners who are in the community working with all these different types of groups. And I think that's the way to do it. And that's the thing I would be advocating with, you know, the next round of engagement is to work with the community groups on the ground. And you've got a really good Hackney CVS, but there's loads of others, you know, Hackwick Awards, there's loads of. So I think that's how we might want to think about it. And the kind of financial piece, I think, you know, to do these things effectively, yes, but again, you can be cost effective by working with partners rather than trying to do everything yourself. And you don't have to employ consultants on great fees. You can work with local partners, which will be more cost effective. I mean, I would say this, but you know, we're advocating that if you can work with us so that we are self-sustaining and based in Hackney Wick for the long term, and we can generate our own income by having assets, we can do some of this stuff, and it doesn't then cost the council money. It's, you know, it's a new model that is kind of, you know, actually it's not a new model. It's been used in other places, but it's a model that we need to adapt more and more as the high street changes, the reliance on kind of commercial and retail, you know, rents. It won't be the same as what it was post-COVID. I think we've got to think differently about how we can use organisations like a CDT to actually deliver some stuff that the council could do, and, you know, we become a resource for you. And that's a long-term play. I appreciate that, but anyway, just thinking of that in response to those sort of 3 points.
Thank you, Alex. Very helpful. I will go to Natalie now. So if you want to say anything further about kind of reaching out to people, but also the kind of costs of consultation and engagement.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to just kind of repeat what Alex has said there. So completely agree. So see, there's a role for targeted consultation, but for me, in order to ensure that we get a diverse range of views on consultation and through planning, there are two key things we need to do. One is explain why it matters, and, you know, why it's important that people get involved, and really kind of sell it to them in a way that's meaningful, and explain why it's important, why it will affect, you know, their lives, why it affects them living and working in Hackney. And the second point is making it easy to respond, and that is understanding what the barriers are, using different techniques, making sure that the documents that we produce are easy to understand and are engaging, and people can respond. So I think it's more or less what Alex was saying there, but yeah, really why it matters and making it easy to respond are the two key elements to it. In terms of cost, there is a cost for all of the plans that we produce, we have to budget consultation costs. I think the main costs, so you have costs like venue hire and things like that. The main costs, I think, are around officer time and then the publication of documents. And again, just to echo what Alex was saying, is the use of the panel to look at ways in which we can innovate and use creative ways of getting the message out to the community and engaging with the community are things that we just need to be a bit more creative in how we get kind of best value for money and how we make sure that the money we do spend on consultation ensures that we get as many responses as possible from as many different communities as possible. So yeah, hopefully that's not too repetitive, but yeah, completely agree with those messages.
Thank you. And before I come to Suzanne, there's a question about the 2021 census data. When are we going to have access to that? Do you know that? So we can use that in our planning and statistics.
That was going to be one of my responses. I've just googled it. I didn't know, so I have checked, and it says May to June 2022.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Suzanne. Did you have any other comments, Gilbert? I'll come back to you. Sorry, Suzanne.
Yes, just one other comment, Chair, just to respond to Councillor Smith's question. I mean, in terms of kind of using data and the information that we have, I guess I just wanted to kind of mention a few other services in the council that both planning and I work really closely with. One is the strategy and policy team, who do kind of create a lot of the statistics that we do use, and a lot of the data comes from them, and that links to our corporate plan. So there's that kind of join up there, and then we've also obviously got a communications and engagement kind of function, and again a lot of the join up is with the engagement function there. So we really, in terms of the costs, we really do try and join up internally to make the best use of the resources that we have to do the most engagement and the most wide-ranging engagement that we can do with the resources that we have. And then, as both Natalie and Alex have said, very keen, and we want to make sure we work with local partners, local stakeholders, because ultimately they know the area probably better than we do, and they've got people in the area that we just can link up with to make it more meaningful and to just directly speak to the people that are kind of most interested.
Thank you, Suzanne. So I'll come on to Councillor Sharman, then Councillor Race for the last two members' questions.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just explore something we haven't really referred to, and that's the role of the private sector in this. And I'm particularly interested because there are assumptions, and I guess it's particularly aimed at Natalie, behind the plan about what's driving regeneration. Because we need, in answering the needs of people, we need to have a degree of control or guidance over meeting those expectations. Otherwise, we're in danger of raising expectations without, or giving people unrealistic expectations. And I raise it in two contexts. One is on the Hackney Wick example, there's a great emphasis and been quite successful in terms of the creative industries. But as I said earlier, that will only answer one particular need within the borough, within the ward. And I'm interested in how we're developing our thoughts around the role of the private sector elsewhere. And we know, for example, in Hackney Central, the closing retail model has been partially successful, partly not successful. And I suppose what I'm really interested in is how we are managing that process of the economic dimension of this in the context of people's expectations and needs for jobs.
Okay, so thanks, Councillor Sharman. Councillor Rex.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to touch on something again that we briefly touched on at the beginning, but just to come back for a bit more of a fuller conversation on it, and that's potentially the expectation gap between a very large, very engaging sort of process, which the Shoreditch Future Action Plan absolutely was, and it was a great process to watch. But in reality, it's a framework for planning, and residents get quite excited. But in reality, the planning frameworks are what the planning frameworks are. So there's only so much that the council can deliver in terms of those local plans within the national kind of framework. So do you feel, I suppose part of the question maybe is, what's the after kind of care with residents? Do we go back to residents after the plans have been sort of developed and say, is this what you were expecting? Is there something missing? Or do we just do the sort of front end bit of kind of gathering everything that everyone wants to talk about and then filtering out the things that actually have got nothing to do with these plans and these discussions overall? And do you worry about that as part of your roles? Thanks.
Okay. Who would like to answer those questions? So going to Councillor Sharman's first about the role of the private sector and some of our past regen projects and maybe lessons we've learned from those and how they relate to expectations of residents. And then, of course, Councillor Race's question, if I'm paraphrasing it incorrectly, please say. So you were looking at the the area action plan in Shoreditch and how that addressed planning areas but not others, and then the kind of aftercare for residents.
Yeah, it's a sort of expectation gap from residents, versus the reality of the plans.
Okay, so I didn't see who put the hand up first. Who would like to go first?
Natalie, you can go first.
I think I was first, Chair, but I'm happy for Suzanne to go first if you want.
Okay, Natalie, I think.
Thank you.
I would say it's fine for you to start.
Yeah, so just I can respond briefly on both of those points and then perhaps I'll hand over to Suzanne. So the private sector is a very broad term, isn't it? So I'll kind of give a bit of a view on how we engage with them and why it's important to engage with various businesses within the private sector. But do let me know, Councillor Sharman, if I've picked up on the point that you wanted me to respond on. So obviously you have developers and landowners, and it's really important that we engage with them as part of the process, particularly when we have the site allocations that Katie told you about in the presentation, where we're allocating a site for development. And it's kind of one of the essential things that we need to do to have a sound plan, because we need to demonstrate that the sites are deliverable and that they will come forward. So that engagement with developers and landowners is really important. We do that at the same time as community engagement, and often we sometimes have within panels, developers come along to the panels, and there's an understanding then from the community that developers are part of the solution to implementing and delivering the plan. And then there's obviously in terms of the private sector, that would also include businesses, shop owners. We have, still a significant amount of employment land and industrial space within the borough, and it's really important that we engage with those business owners as well and understand what their future spatial needs are, so that we can plan for that. And we do that by collecting, by kind of engaging with them as part of the process and understanding and collecting data from them alongside kind of data on kind of future economic growth projections. So we have, for example, a town centre study which informs the local plan, an employment land study which focuses a bit more on our employment land, our industrial land, and that's really important in shaping the local plan. So community engagement is a key element, but also engagement with other partners by identifying what the future needs are of the borough, but also ensuring that any of our plans that we put forward are deliverable. And then,
Natalie, I actually understand you're talking to a lot of different people. I guess my question is, how do you make a judgment between those different aspects of pressure and goes back to my point, the overwhelming pressure, which I know only too well in Hackney Wick, is that the developers have the money, they have the plans, they have the pressure. Our job is to try and find a balance between these other people that you talk about, the other economic needs. And I guess what I'm really trying to pursue is what model do you have in mind in each of these areas to try and ensure that we get a genuinely broad-based development that answers the needs and expectations of the community that you were talking about earlier?
I think the answer is in the evidence that we have that also supports the plan. So I suppose what the sorts of things that we will set out in the local plan is the scale and quantum of development, but also the mix of uses. So it's about understanding what the community wants and getting views from the community, but we also need to ensure that developments, when they come forward, are viable. So we have a viability study which underpins anything that we put forward in our either our area-based or local plans, and then evidence on what the needs are, and that helps inform what we consider to be an acceptable guidance on what uses and what scale of development should come forward. So I think it's about that, making sure that we have a robust evidence base. But you're quite right, we'll have, alongside that engagement from residents, you will have developers and landowners that also comment at the same time on a proposal as it emerges. But we will take into account all of those comments alongside the evidence to ensure that what we put forward is acceptable in planning terms.
Is it okay if I come in, Chair, just while we're on that question? I mean, I think speaking kind of from the regen perspective, I mean, the private sector and engaging with landowners, developers, businesses, any other kind of element of the private sector is really key. I mean, what we want to do with our areas is identify all the stakeholders and talk to, the main stakeholders in an area. And when I say that, I mean the community at large, residents, as a main stakeholder, I mean businesses, and I also mean kind of developers and landowners, because I think what would be, in terms of where regen comes in, so Natalie's just talked about the kind of strategic planning element and plan making and AAPs and SPDs. Where I would consider the regen, area regen work to have failed is if we talk to a developer or a landowner and an idea or a site allocation goes into the plan, and then the next time we see them is when a planning application comes into the local authority that we're not happy with. So the role of regen and other partners indeed that are working in an area is to effectively have that long-term relationship throughout the whole process. So therefore, when a developer or a landowner, in this case, if we're talking about them as a private sector as an example, is working up their plans for a scheme, we regen are effectively working alongside saying, all right, well, could you do this because the community have asked for this? You need to make sure that we get some social value because we want these jobs, or we want this training, or we want this type of use. So I hope that, and I'm kind of putting together a response based on what Natalie's just said, but I guess what I'm trying to do is illustrate how the process works kind of seamlessly, to make sure that effectively we don't have a site allocated in the plan and then the next thing we see is a planning application. It's about the whole process, and the reason that process is there is to make sure we get the most from the private sector, and we have an ask of the private sector about what we want from them. Because if we don't have that ask and we've not asked the community, and it's not based on what the community want and have fed back to us, then I don't think we're working effectively, and we're not doing as well as we could do for our residents and for the borough.
Chair, if I could just add to that, and then the process doesn't just end there. So it's that engagement by the developer at the pre-application stage with the community is key. With most major, certainly significant developments that come forward, developers know that they need to bring communities with them, we often see now lots of quite extensive engagement happening with the community before an application is submitted at that pre-application stage, and that is certainly something that we really do encourage. when developers approach us for pre-application advice, we really do encourage them to do extensive engagement with the community to help shape the detailed planning proposal that will then come forward through the planning application.
Well, can I just set out what I see the problem is? We go out to community consultation and we find a lot of unmet needs, particularly around housing. We then listen to what the private sector wants, all the things you've just been talking about. Lo and behold, they want something totally different. They want expensive private sector housing. And we're then locked in a bargain around, as you say, the viability efforts, and goodness knows Vincent makes this all the time. And what happens is that we get trumped all the time by viability and land values, and we cannot build the housing that we want. And we know that, and planning is the last refuge, the last barrier to this. And it's a very weak one, I think. And I think we've got to not raise people's expectations that planning is going to meet the needs of the community. Housing is the most obvious one, but I think it also operates in other fields of jobs as well. So I guess, I mean, it's not really calling for an answer, it's just the lived experience. I'm on the LLDC planning committee, Vincent runs the Hackney one, and I'm sure that's a shared experience that we've had. So I guess my worry is about raising expectations by doing some very good consultation that you've talked about and not being able actually to have a system that will ever remotely meet them.
I think that possibly links to Councillor Race's point about aftercare. I don't know if I'm correct in that. If you could link to that, Natalie, in terms of time, that'd be great.
Thank you, Chair. I will do. Just to go back on that particular point, I mean, we have a very, very robust process for assessing viability evidence that's submitted in applications, and we have an excellent team who will make sure that development delivers maximum possible affordable housing on schemes that come forward, the maximum possible viable affordable housing. So yeah, we do have a very robust process in place for that. I think Councillor Race's point was around need for continuous engagement, and do we feed back? And it's great engaging with the community and getting their views, but do we demonstrate to them that their comments have made a difference? And I think we do. I think we could probably do a bit better on that. So when we get to the next stage of consultation, each time we do a consultation report and we summarise comments that are raised and how that's informed the next stage of plan making. What I would say is that often, just because of the processes involved, it can take some time, and I think the need for perhaps more regular engagement with the communities and keeping them up to date is really important. So the importance of keeping our website up to date, but also perhaps just checking in and updating those residents and businesses that comment on plans is really important. And then perhaps once the plan is adopted, maybe we should check in and say, how's this been implemented in your area? And I think that's probably something, if we had the resources to do, there would be some value in doing that. But perhaps we could pick that up, Katie, as part of our monitoring report, see whether there's some scope there at some point in time.
I noticed Councillor Smith had his hand up and put it down, and Councillor Palace, I've also got another question or two. Can I suggest, because of time, that we direct those questions to the officers and they also be included in the minutes, the responses to those questions? It's just because of time, I think, we need to wrap up this item. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to thank officers for attending, and also Alex, very much for your time. I hope you found it useful, and certainly we, in terms of this committee, we've just started having this conversation, and we look forward to following up, with, a next steps type approach. And we've also already mentioned that an action is, to have a follow-up area regen discussion. So yes, so I'd like to formally close this item, and You are welcome to stay, but if you want to go, officers, then have a good evening. Now is the time to go.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, item 6, minutes of the previous meeting. If we just all look at page 43 in the pack. So page 1, which was on page 43, page 44, page 45, page 46,
I wasn't here.
page 47, page 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, quite a lot of minutes there.
Very impressive.
54, 55, very detailed, thank you, Tim,
Thank you,
we
Tim.
appreciate that. 56, 57, 58 and 59. Can we agree those minutes?
Agreed. Councillor Smith has something to say.
Councillor Smith, would you like to come in?
Oh, you're on mute there, Councillor Smith.
You're on mute, Councillor Smith.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just looking at these minutes. 5.39, when Councillor Stopps asked whether the population of the borough, sorry, not that one, the one about, he asked if areas like Stoke Newington, Stamford Hill, Victoria Park and Hoxton will be subject to further regeneration work. I mean, certainly from my perspective as a Stoke Newington councillor, I would like to know that. I should have maybe asked that when the officers were there, but I'd like to get an answer to that. 5.41, please.
Yeah.
I know the Stamford Hill's already in there, but Victoria Park in Stoke Newington would be good to know about.
I'll pursue that with them offline, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add the SPD for Finsbury Park. Even though we are a smaller partner with the London Borough of Islington, it also needs including in that as well. Okay. All right. So.
Oh yes, there was.
Where are we? Matters, so there's no matters arising from these minutes, and they've been agreed. Obviously, Councillor Smith has suggested a follow-on question. So item 7, any other business? Nobody's notified me.
Councillor Palace has raised her hand.
Just 2 points. One, it was a good session today, well chaired, Claire. It's always difficult. I was just wondering whether we could truncate officer presentations. I'm not really sure that officer presentations need to be taking up an hour. I think, to be honest, officer presentations mostly could be done in around 5 to 10 minutes. I think, then we can potentially fit in, more questions, because I think there were potentially more questions. I was just wondering if I could put something on, because I did have my hand up right at the end. I know we were squeezed for time. I just wanted to make a comment that I completely agree with Councillor Sharman around the need to obviously optimise as much affordable housing as possible. I just wanted, in the discussion, for it also to kind of be highlighted the difficulty officers face with the current government we have, and that they are working within a legal definition of affordable, which is not affordable, and they are also working within a legal parameters around viability, again, which don't really stand up to it in kind of inspection. But unfortunately, that is the mode that they have to work within. Now, as I've raised in a previous meeting, I think we should look at intermediate housing and whether shared ownership should necessarily be part of what our aspirations are. But I just wanted to just make that comment.
Thank you, Councillor Palace.
I just wanted to highlight that because I do think officers obviously cannot say that, and we can, and I just think it just be highlighted. Though I completely understand what Councillor Sharman is saying, and I agree that we need to push as far as we can within the legal dimensions that we're in.
Yeah.
We do.
And just
I
to
mean,
say that.
hang on. The meeting is still being recorded. Can I remind members that it's still being recorded? Can I just make a comment just to say about the length of the officer presentations? Because it was quite a substantive item, we kind of allowed the officers to take more time. Perhaps we could have structured it slightly differently, but I do accept that we did run out of time for members' questions, and that, you know, would have been useful. So what I'm going to do now is, if I formally declare the meeting closed,
Thank you for recording.